I hope you guys are having a great night. We are going to cover the success series about buying, fixing, and flipping tonight. I love fixing and flipping for so many reasons. It's fun to get that ugly property and make it beautiful. It's nice to get that money at the end, the big chunks of money. Some of those chunks of money are bigger than a person's salary for a whole year just by doing one fix and flip. So that part's really fun too. It is definitely a challenge. There are a lot of moving parts you have to manage, but if you're drawn to a good challenge and you like to see things go from crazy to successful, this could be a very good technique for you. So definitely assembling your team is critical when you're doing fixing and flipping, because you never know who you're going to need. You're for sure going to need some of the people on this list, like a title company or an attorney for purchasing and for closing at the end for selling. Insurance, you need to have insurance to cover everything while you own that property, because if there's a vandalism or a fire or something like that happens, you definitely want to be prepared for that. You would hate to lose all of your cash up in flames like that. Not so much a property manager for this technique in particular, definitely a handyman, contractors, and then however you find your deals, either through real estate agents, bird doggers, wholesalers, yourself, it doesn't matter, but definitely you'll have to have some ways to find those really good deals. So that's kind of your short list. I'd say out of the really critical ones for this technique, you've got to have a way to find the deals. So anybody on the finder's list, you have to have some kind of funding, whether it's your own cash or somebody else's. You have to have contractors to get the work done, and you're going to have a title company or attorney. So those are your essential people for this kind of technique. Now, what we cover in our 6-week series on buying, fixing, and flipping, we cover all that I just told you, who you need, but also how do you do it? How do you manage the contractors? It's important to have contracts that protect you, because otherwise you can get very taken advantage of by the contractors. I've had to fire a few, which was not my favorite part of doing the deals, but it's important to know how to let somebody go and how to protect yourself when you have to do that. So switching contractors, interviewing contractors in the first place. We also cover what you need as far as estimating the cost. That's really important to know how to analyze your deals so you don't end up losing money. So just keep in mind that in the 6 weeks we cover from start to finish how to find the deals, how to fix them up, how to manage contractors, how to make sure you're profitable in your deals, the team that you'll definitely need. The contracts and offers are very important because if you don't get the contracts right, it can also make you lose money. How you offer is going to not only determine if you're going to be profitable or not, but it could also bring on a lawsuit if you're not careful. And this is not just on the purchase contract and the sale contract, but also in the middle with those other workers that you're going to be dealing with. And then we cover exit strategies and go over a review at the end of the series. So week 1, we specifically dive into what is the process. How do you make sure that you can get it funded? Because you don't just have the purchase price, you've got all the holding costs, you know, your utilities, your taxes, your insurance, maybe an HOA fee depending on where the property is located, and all of the expenses along the way. And then you also have your fix-up costs. So how do you estimate as accurately as you can on those fix-up costs so you don't end up going way over budget and again losing money? So we talk about completing the rehab on the property successfully, and then also marketing and selling the property. There have been some deals that I've done that I fixed up, and before we even put it on the MLS, just stuck a sign in the yard, we were getting phone calls. Even better than that, there were some deals where in the middle of the rehab, we went and stuck a sign out in the front yard, and we had people come and contact us that wanted to buy the property. Other times they wanted to have a little say-so in what kind of carpet went into the deal, what paint colors, and you have to be kind of careful with that. So we talk about some tips like that along the way. Hey, if somebody comes to you and they say they want to buy it and they start specifically telling you what they want in the house, what are the pros and cons of that, and how can you kind of accommodate them without making the house so personalized for them that nobody else is going to want to buy it. So tips and tricks along the way for sure. I think I heard a little background noise. Steve, are you on there?
Yeah, that would be me.
Hey, fabulous. Welcome. So do you have anything that you want to add so far about the process or what we cover in week 1?
I don't really know what you said. I just got here, so
Okay.
we're good.
All right. Well, I'll check with you in a few slides and see what you have to add at that point.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So your parameters, a lot of people that we work with first say, I don't even know how to tell if it's a good deal. Well, that's what we help you figure out. How do you know if you're potentially profitable? So we cover when you're picking out your deal, what about the price range, the location? I'm going to tell you honestly, I'm always honest, right? You're going to probably have a couple of deals you wish that you had picked in a different location. You can do your best, you can get research and all that done. Steve has a couple of funny stories about that, about location on fix and flip. So we'll give you real life examples of, oops, we did that, make sure you don't do that. And then the types of properties in general that you want to work with, it's important to determine that from the beginning. And we can help walk you through that as far as, do you want to just stick with houses? What are the pros and cons of multifamily or commercial properties? A lot of new investors that want to do fixing and flipping, they just start with little houses, the bread and butter houses that are more easy in, easy out, nothing too big, definitely not high-end homes. So we have some pretty strong opinions about that just because of safety for you guys. We want to make sure that you get in and you make money and that the deals are more cookie cutter in a lot of ways than before you get more experienced and start branching out into other things. So we do walk you through how to interview realtors, how to interview potential investors, especially if you need private investors or partners for your deals. Who you get into bed with, and I am going to put it that strongly, can definitely make or break your deals as well. So you want to be very careful who you pick as partners and who your investors are. And there is a difference. There's a huge difference liability-wise. There's a huge difference with the paperwork that you do with them. So we walk through the difference between those two categories, partners and private investors, and how to safely either put them all together in a deal or divide so that you have certain ones on some deals and certain ones on other deals. And then also why it's important to attend your local REI meetings, your real estate investment clubs in your area. Week 2 on finding, funding, and analyzing. Whenever you buy, fix, and flip, you need to make sure that you are adding value that's going to come back to you. So that's something that we talk about. You can overdo a property. You could put in $100,000, but you're only going to get an extra $50,000 of value back on some of them. So you have to be careful that you only rehab to the value of the neighborhood. So the primary focus on your property needs to, in general, be houses that need a lot of repair, a very significant amount, because this is where you're going to create your sweat equity and the real value that comes back to you in the form of profit, cash, which we all like. Steve, do you have anything on that?
Just that there's lots of different places where you can actually find deals, and we go over that in detail in a number of different areas. But what's really key and important to understand here, like the slide says, is that most of the time when you're going to get a good deal, it's because you've been able to solve a problem. And what we presented here is kind of focused on the house itself. And if you're going to be buying and fixing something, obviously it kind of lends itself to houses that need a lot of repair and fix up. But you also want to look for opportunities where you can solve problems where the owner is the issue. And sometimes that can also give you a pretty good deal.
Yep, absolutely. That's why I like to be careful saying always going to need a lot of repair, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes you get into a really sweet deal just because the seller is distressed, not the property itself being distressed. And those are some nice deals too.
And if you're going to just go into a rental exit strategy, sometimes you can just get away with paint and flooring. And if there's not excessive problems in the house, that's enough just to do a rental deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do talk about those differences, how you're going to rehab. So in this series, we always have little bits and pieces that kind of overlap into the other series as well. And that's one of them is on your fix up. Are you fixing up to rent? Or are you fixing up to resell? Very different rehab models. So specifically on the finding, fixing, and flipping, remember that with the finding, you're mostly going to focus down in on vacant and abandoned houses, properties that are either in the pre-foreclosure or foreclosure process, and then the difference between those different parts of the pre-foreclosure or the foreclosure itself, the red tag houses, and any auctions. And then on funding, we really love the mix and match of private lenders, hard money lenders, transactional funding, and conventional funding, depending on your credit, depending on the deal itself. And it's important to know how to mix and match the funding together to, again, make it more profitable. Some of those things, like a hard money lender versus a private lender, could cost you 3 or 4 times as much just for the cost of the money. So those are things that we like to caution people about, and it's good to weigh out all your options. And sometimes you don't have the option yet of having decent private lenders that have lower interest rates, but that's definitely a goal. It should be a goal of yours until you have all of your own cash that you're either partnering or finding private lenders. Transactional funding actually can be very inexpensive too, and we have quite a few slides on that help you understand when and where that kind of funding might be most advantageous, especially if you don't have any private lenders. Steve, anything on those two, the finding and the funding?
No, you handled that well.
Okay.
Just to understand, we go into a lot of the detail of the how-to on each of these. So
Yeah.
this gives you a little bit of a roadmap on where we're going, some of the steps that you would need to take. The fine-tuning, of course, is going to come in the webinar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just because private lenders are my favorite doesn't mean I always have private investors just sitting around. They come and they go, and sometimes their money comes and goes. So I might have somebody that says, ooh, I'd love to do this deal, but all of my money is out on other projects right now. So the timing on the money and the amount of funds that you can have accessible to you, that's going to make up a lot of your mind for you. But that's why the deeper you can go into levels of different lenders and different funding options, the more options you have available. The more options, usually the cheaper you can get your financing done. So analyzing includes determining the after repair value, the ARV. Also, do you use real estate agents, online estimates, and tax evaluations for those things, and which of those are the most accurate? And then determining the cost of repairs. There are some basic formulas that a lot of new investors use, but there are definitely a couple of ways that we would prefer that you do that so that you guys are more accurate in your estimates. And then adding the hold time estimate. So, that really has to play on days of market, because the days on market in any given neighborhood could be, I've seen them really high, like over 9 months before, and sometimes they're gone in days. So that's kind of the spectrum there. And 3 to 6 months is an average, but you have to remember that the hold time on those includes from the time you close, the time to get the contractor started, the time to get the work finished, and then the time to sell. So if your days on market are around 3 months, you've still got 1 to 3 months on the front of that before you even sit it on the market for sale on the MLS. If it made it that far, you might have actually stuck a sign in the yard and had it pre-sold, which again is fantastic, but it doesn't happen all the time. So you really have to be careful to estimate your holding costs high enough that you're not going to run out of money. And I'm sure that all of you, if you've been watching fix and flips or looking at properties around town for long enough, you've seen some projects that got partway done and they ran out of money. You can tell because they have this really cool stuff in some places and then the rest of the house is unfinished. That was an investor that didn't estimate their holding costs or the repair costs high enough, and they got stuck holding the bag. It's really important here, this is a little note at the bottom, to only use recent sales. If you try to compare the subject property that you have right now with properties that sold a year ago, that won't be very accurate. Markets go up and down all the time. So you want to stay really close, like within the last 3 to 6 months if you can. If there's nothing that sold like it in the last 3 to 6 months and you have to go up to 9 months or a year, you do what you have to do. But that's where it's really, really important to get some of the real estate agents or appraisers involved in determining what the true ARV is, the real after repair value, as close as possible. Steve, anything on that?
Yeah, since this is today's takeaway on this section here, I just want to give you a little more detail.
Okay.
I wanted to focus on the hold times. So the 3-month hold time kind of reflects an in and out market. You get in, you get it done, and it's gone. The 6-month is something that you're going to find in markets where things aren't moving as fast. But if you're in an area where things are taking 9 months to sell, you want to be able to pick your properties up and resell them on the market enough below value that they'll still be gone in 6 months, which means you need to shift what you're pricing things at significantly, because you don't want any deal that you're buying and fixing to last longer than a 6-month deal. Your the costs of funding are going to eat you up. The holding costs will just eat you up. So just go in planning on being well below market so that you get it gone in that 6-month time period. So just a little piece of advice there.
Okay, excellent. And amen. So week 3, when we cover contractors and the repairs and the maintenance part of it, this is where insurance is really important in that holding period. And with the work that's going to be done, there are some ways that you can contract in your contractors so that they are not employees. You want to be very careful. And again, some of this could be construed as legal advice as far as how you do your contracts or what types. So I just want to make clear we are not attorneys. You should use whatever contracts your attorney recommends for you. But in general, I would recommend that all of your contractors are independent contractors and do not have any employee status, or then you can get into workman's comp and tax issues and all sorts of things that you're not going to want to deal with when you're just trying to fix and flip and get them turned and make money. You don't want to end up in court. Steve, anything on that?
No, that's a really important point, though.
And also you want to make sure that either you pull the permits or your contractors are able to pull the proper permits for your area. I called on a deal, it was probably about 6 months ago, and it was a very good price, but it was a property that had gotten shut down by the city, and they didn't have any more money to finish the project. And like Steve was mentioning on the holding costs, and the interest can eat you up. The cost of the money along the way can eat you up. They actually had the city come and shut them down because they hadn't pulled the proper permits. And now obviously that extends the time, the money for the permitting. But worse than that, if you have to tear everything out that you just did and redo it, think about how expensive that would be. So if you're double paying for all of the repairs plus some demolition, you just shot your whole budget and then some. So make sure that you get the permits.
Make sure you don't cut corners, because especially if a house has been condemned, if there's not a certificate of occupancy, they're going to come, they have to do an inspection in order to make that happen. And if you've cut corners and they determine that it's not occupiable for whatever reason, and you might have to tear down something in order to fix that problem, that gets extremely expensive. So do yourself a favor and just do it right the first time.
Yep, amen. All right, make sure that you've got an estimation on not only what work needs to be done, but the timeline. Remember that your rehab plan, you've got to sketch it out, because you can't throw in the kitchen cupboards before certain things are done. You can't put in the flooring before certain things are done. So you need to make sure that everything is lined up. And if you have one general contractor doing everything start to finish, then he'll know the order of things. But that was something that I had to learn on my first few, is how important it is to schedule the right guys at the right time. A real simple example, you can't schedule the painter before the sheetrocker goes in and does all of the sheetrock and the mudding and taping. So sure, you'd say, well, that's obvious, but when you're brand new and you have 20 different things that you're juggling, you could get a couple of them mixed up or backwards, and they're always on job to job to job too. So if they're not scheduling your job at the right time, you might get stuck behind another project or two that they have to finish first and then come back and finish. So it's really, really important that you timeline things as best you can. Steve?
Very good.
Okay.
Just make a plan and follow through on it. That's the way to be successful.
Yes. Now this part I really, really like, because if you look at this part that says, are you an investor or a day laborer? I like it because it really is so vital. It's important to remember, and I didn't really understand it when I first started. I thought, well, it's okay, we can save a little money doing this or that. But if you can make $25,000, $30,000 per house pretty conservatively, and you're saving $2,000 doing some work yourself and missing another house opportunity, your net loss really is about $27,000, $28,000 right in there. So you have to remember that you are an investor. Your job is to find deals, get them fixed, and get them turned. Your job is not to be in there painting instead of taking those 3, 4, 5 days out looking for new deals. So do you want to be a contractor or do you want to be an investor? Very important to clarify. When you're picking up a paintbrush, you're making the wages of a painter. When you pick up the tile saw, you're making the wages of somebody that lays tile. So remember, whatever you're doing, that's exactly what you're earning at that moment. Everybody needs to get paid, it's true, but if you wear both of those hats, then guess what? You're losing money somewhere. That's just the bottom line. You're losing money somewhere. Steve, you got anything on that?
Yeah, and this is a common mistake that a lot of new investors make is they figure, well, I can do it myself for free instead of having to pay somebody else to do it. And if you don't have anything else to do and you need some money, that's an okay approach. But as an investor, you would rather be spending your time doing the things that create the most income, and that's going to be most likely going out and putting another deal together rather than painting something.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't I can't emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that you include in your budget the cost of the labor. Whether you perform it or somebody else performs it, it needs to be in there. You can't make the deal better simply by doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Unless
What
you
if
want
you
to work
got in
for free.
Yeah, exactly. What if you got in a car accident and you couldn't finish the work? So that money that you would have been saving doing it yourself, you have to hire out now. And so that is why it's important, like he said, to have that cost in the budget one way or another. There might be a family emergency too. Maybe you need to leave the state for a while. Just things like that happen. Life happens. So if your budget is right from the beginning, then you don't have to worry if it ends up on you or not. And I would say that's a really good point, Steve, that if you don't have anything else to do, if you know you're just doing one deal until it gets done and you have some extra time on the weekend, sure, you can go over and maybe do a little landscaping, a little painting, whatever you like to do. But hopefully your goal is that you're going to become an investor, and that means you have to switch the hats that you're wearing and really get to the point where you're just managing everything. You're project manager, and so you're not the contractor anymore. But there can be situations for sure where it makes a little bit of sense for you to save some money, but definitely do like he said and put it into the budget. All right, things, wow. Listen, thing. We got things to consider. We got types of contractors, where to find a good contractor, the criteria for good contractors, because you can find a bunch of contractors who says they're actually good at what they do. So how do you interview them? How do you screen them? The contract itself, and then how you choose to pay them. The inspections that are needed, who's doing them, how often are they required, what do you have in your contract as far as inspections that are required. And these can be city inspections, they can be your personal inspections, they can be a lot. And who's in charge of those? Are you going to meet the city inspectors when they come and check your four-way, or are you going to have the contractor do that? You need to be clear on who's doing what and who's responsible for what. And then controlling your costs and buying materials. Steve, why don't you talk to him just for a second about why it's important on who buys the materials?
Well, there's a couple of issues here regarding that. One really important one is whether or not they are considered employees or whether they are independent contractors. So there's a couple of things that can really trigger the view that you're actually having employees, and then you need to take care of things like unemployment insurance and withholding and whatnot. One of those is if you supply the materials, that's an issue. Another one is if you require them to be on the job site at a specific time, that's another employer issue. So you need to be a little careful about how you do that. Also, sometimes the contractors, because of what they do, they can buy the materials wholesale. And their bid may include making a little bit of profit on those materials. And if you take that away from them, then they have to up the bid as far as, what the whole thing's going to cost in order to recoup what they would have made on the being able to purchase the materials cheaper than you could. So there's a couple of thoughts on that.
Yep. Good. Thank you. So as far as today's takeaway, what you'd be getting into about that is getting referrals. These are our tips for you, in case you haven't picked up on that. Get good referrals. Your REI clubs, where there are other investors. I remember referring out all my favorite people because I want them to stay in business. So it's not a hoggy thing where you just hog the people to yourself. It's really about paying it forward, making sure that you're professional, referring professional people to other people so we can keep all the good guys in business, the ones that actually show up and do their job and don't take advantage of people. If you've been in the business long enough, you know that you probably have been cheated short somewhere, which is sad to say, but it happens. And especially in getting the work done. People sometimes cut corners and that costs you money. So you need to be very careful that you get the best referrals that are out there in your community to the best people. Stores that sell to contractors like Lowe's, Home Depot, usually if you go in early in the morning, you find the hard workers. They're up early, they're getting their materials, they're out on the job. So that is good if you check in the mornings on the weekdays. And then you can also ask the people at the pro desk. Sometimes they'll say, sorry, we can't refer people, but sometimes they can. And sometimes you can just sit to the side and wait for the people to walk in and out too and find some really good, hard-working contractors that way. Steve, I know you have some say-so on some of these, so why don't you pitch in?
Well, I was just thinking one of the hard parts about being an independent contractor like that is where's the next job? Mm-hmm. And you really want to eliminate that thought in the guys that you're working with, so they're not out there looking, as yours is starting to come to a close. And one of the things you can do to help that is let them know that you will refer good people to good people. And so they're going to want to do a good job for you because they know that you're one of the keys that's going to help them line up the next job. And even better would be is if you were doing more frequent jobs yourself so that there's something they can fall into when this job is complete. But if you just let them know that your intention is to take care of these guys, they'll do a much better job for you and they'll be efficient. They'll get it done and they'll come in on budget. So they're not looking to make one quick score and then be off somewhere else. You want to help them to invest in a future with you and with people you'll refer them to.
Yep, absolutely. And sometimes I guess I take that for granted, but that whole thing going both ways, if you show yourself to be somebody that they can trust, if you need a job done quickly, sometimes they'll bump a different job and say yes to yours instead of a different one because of how you've treated them as well. So the referrals go both ways. They can refer other people to you and you can refer other people to them. It's really important.
You talk about how, some of us as investors have been stung by a bad contractor, but that goes both ways. There's contractors that have not been paid by investors.
Yep.
So it's valuable to them to know they've got a safe place to land.
Yeah, for sure. This bottom part about comparing bids from 3 contractors, at least 3, is very important. And I'll tell you, sometimes it's tempting to get lazy, but sadly, also been in the business long enough that I have seen where contractors start to pad their bids more and more because they know that you have stopped shopping around. You want to keep them on their toes too, because again, this is business. You do want to be professional. You want to pay them like you say that you will. They need to do what they've said they will do on your project. But at the end of the day, you always want to be careful and protect your business funds. That means if you always get bids from other people, you'll know if they're still in the ballpark or if they're padding too much. So on week 4, we talk about marketing, definitely getting the house sold so you can get the money in your pocket. You need to sell it conventionally or on the retail market. You've got to figure out if you're going to go with the for sale by owner listing or pop it on the MLS. A lot of marketing is done online these days. So it's nice to know in your area what the good local websites are that you can use, as well as the national ones. like Craigslist is a national one, but you can put your property for sale on there. It may or may not do as well as some of your local classifieds. We have one here that is much more used regularly by the people that live in this area than Craigslist is. And then I've also invested in other cities where Craigslist was the thing. So you really want to shop around, ask around, make sure the pricing for your advertising is in line. Some places you can actually advertise for free, which is very nice. And then auctioning is an option. If you want to auction it off, there are a few different ways to do that. There's not just one type of auction. And then you can sell it as a rental to another investor. You can offer seller financing to a retail buyer that might have the cash to get into the house, but not the credit. Or if you're taking a very low down payment, sometimes they don't even need much cash. A little bit of cash and okay credit can get them into a house, and you can get it sold at top dollar, because if you're offering seller financing, usually you're not discounting on the price. So it's kind of a win-win for both you and the buyer. And then maybe you want to refinance it and keep it as a rental. Not bad. If it ends up being in a better location than you planned, maybe. I've had that happen sometimes. So I told you earlier, sometimes I've thought, oh, I kind of wish I hadn't bought it in this neighborhood, because you don't know. Sometimes it's street by street. It's a good street, a bad street, a good street, a bad street. And sometimes if you're not really familiar with the streets, that can be an issue. Well, it works the other way as well. Sometimes you buy it and you think, this is a great location. I'd really like to keep this long term, and then you can stick it in your portfolio. So we go over 36 different ideas on week 4 about how to market your property. Steve, what do you have on that one?
Just understand that there's lots of different strategies that you can implement as a acquisition as well as an exit strategy. And what you choose to use is going to depend a lot on your situation, what resources you have available to you, what's going on in the market, and what your end goals are. And so hopefully what I hope you can see is that there's some different possibilities. There's one that's going to be the best in this situation. Then you'll need to have a backup plan, plan B, plan C, whatever. And just kind of line those things up and then start to pursue what's going to be most beneficial in this situation. And just understand that the more you learn, the more options that you become familiar with, the more choices you'll have, the more opportunities you'll have to make good money on whatever deal comes across.
Excellent. All right. There are some very nice flyer templates out there on the internet. Steve's picked one here that is very pleasant to the eye. So you can get some from Zillow.com. What are some of your other favorite template places, Steve?
Well, this is the only one I've used.
Oh, well, there you go.
I don't have other. I know they are out there. I just haven't used them.
So I have some that came with Microsoft Office. And then if you guys, and honestly, this is a tip for everything that you need. If there's something that you don't know, like where can I find my REI clubs? Where's a good attorney? Where can I find good free flyer templates? Just Google it. It's one of the easiest things you can do in your business. And this goes for any kind of business, but especially real estate investing. I found the internet to be insanely helpful. So just type in free template for flyers, boom, it'll pop you up some options. You want to be careful because sometimes they do say it's free and then you get on there and you can build it all, but then it charges you before you print it. So you can build it for free, but not print it for free. So if you have Microsoft Office, great. I know that Google Docs has a ton of free stuff on it as well. So you can get really good, not just flyer templates, but also like letters. If you're marketing for good deals and you're sending out some letters to vacant home owners and people that are in a foreclosure, like to the notice of default list, then there are some really good free things on there also. Week 5, we cover contracts and offers. It is super, super important to understand your contract. If you start signing something that you don't understand, you could be in a world of hurt. So we go over what the important components of a contract are, what you need to watch out for, and also what is standard, like what is normal in a contract. 2-week standard for a home inspection period for your due diligence? Is 2 days normal? What's a normal appraisal time? Do you need 5 days, 10 days, 25 days? So these deadlines are very important to understand, and they do vary a little bit state to state. So we always caution you guys to get familiar with what's going on in your area, what's normal and acceptable, and then fun things like earnest money. In some states, you don't actually have to have earnest money down in order to get your deal accepted. In other areas of the country, it's going to be very critical. And there are some places, like parts of California come to mind, where you have to have a lot of earnest money down or they're not even going to look at your offer. So how do you get your offers written so that they get taken seriously? Because if you put in an offer and there are 3, 4, 5 other people at the same time doing offers, if they don't like yours, they're going to go with somebody else's. So you want your offer to be clean. You want it to be very presentable from the get-go. You don't want to have to mess around with that thing. They are designed to keep everybody safe. So learning more about contracts and how they're designed to keep you and the other party safe as well, that's important. Knowing that they're not supposed to be scary and intimidating. They can be very intimidating from the beginning. You look at that, and sometimes, like the Texas contract, I think it's 16 pages, isn't it, Steve? Right around there. That's a huge contract. How are you ever going to know every paragraph of that? Well, only if you practice it and study it and dissect it and ask. And there are a lot of things you can do to get familiar with the contract, but a 2-pager versus a 16-pager, obviously that's going to be a little less intimidating, but it still needs to have the same basic components, even if it's a 2-pager. So we go over what those essential contract details are. Steve, what do you have on that one?
Just that if you want to look professional, you need to know your contracts. And if you want to stay out of trouble, you want to know what your contracts are saying. So study them. Get one that's been approved either by the state or through an attorney so that you're not left with a contract that's not defensible.
And I always like to tell stories. So when we have more time in longer webinars, it's fun to say, hey, here's an example of how to do this or not do this. There is one story in particular that cost, was $20,000. So if $20,000 is important to you, then I would recommend you find out what that mistake is that we made so that you don't make the same mistake. So sometimes paying for education is for knowing what to do, and sometimes paying for education is knowing what not to do. And I have a lot of fun stories on both ends of that spectrum. And fortunately, more on the to-do than the not-to-do, but I still think the not-to-dos are really, really funny sometimes. Well, now they're funny because they're in the past. Not so funny at the time. But I like stories, so we share some of those along the way too, and especially on contracts. I've got a couple of doozies for you guys. Now, when you're making offers, remember, like Steve said, you want to present the offer well. How you present yourself as credible right from the beginning is really important. The more that you can present the offer in person, the more you're going to have control over your negotiations. You won't have so much drag time back and forth, maybe where you present a counteroffer and they counteroffer and then you counteroffer, and you are several days to a week back and forth, where if you're sitting across from them face to face, a lot of times you can get it worked out within the hour. So working with an agent can be good, and especially if it's a listed property on the MLS, you'll need to really plan to do that. It's not even, in my opinion, and we'll ask Steve's opinion in a minute, not even smart for you to try to go in and represent yourself against a licensed realtor. I just think that there are too many ways that you might make mistakes in trying to represent yourself. So if you have an agent, a buyer's agent that can represent you to the seller's agent, that would be a better option. Steve, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I have a little bit of mixed emotions about that, actually. And
remember, if you're not experienced. So if you're experienced, but think about a brand new investor making their first or second offer, Do you
Yeah.
think that they would
Yeah.
be okay?
Well, no.
That's where I would get
I,
really nervous. Like I would do it, but I also have experience as an investor and as a realtor. I don't know many people I would say,
yeah.
there you go, present your offer yourself through an agent. Now, presenting your offer directly to the seller, sure, I did that, right off the bat. I made a couple of mistakes, but for the most part, you're on more even playing ground when you and a for sale by owner are negotiating together. But if you're negotiating with a licensed realtor, there's a little imbalance there, and you're probably not going to get yourself and all of your interests represented the best ways possible. So what do you have to say
Yeah.
about, new versus experienced as well?
Well, some of my first deals I did myself, and I went directly to the person. And here's a little bit of the balance, and here's where I'm at a little, where's that ambivalence checks in, is that I'm a problem solver, and I really want to get into the mind of the seller and why they're selling, what problems they have, and digging in and finding out how I can best fix those problems and make this deal work for them in a lot of different ways besides or other than just the money. That's really difficult to do if you have agent in the middle. On the other hand, agents do know what they're doing and they'll keep you safe. But that's where the trade-off is that there's a little bit of difference between just simply putting out an offer and staying safe and being able to get in and actually do a really great job of solving somebody's problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if you are dealing with a property that's listed with a real estate agent, you better get your own agent anyway. You're not going to be able to have that interaction with a private individual. But if you are working with somebody on a property that's not listed with a real estate agent, you may want to just give it a try, just sitting down and talking with those folks without involving an agent and just on a person to person level, let them know that you were really concerned about being able to solve their problems. And the more they know, the more you know about what's going on in their lives, the more you know about what they need, the more likely it is you're going to be able to give that to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes the face-to-face one-on-one.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. So finding a state-approved real estate contract is a very safe way to go. You can also go to your office supply stores like Office Max, Office Depot, and they will have contracts for you. But no matter what kind you use, whether it's the state-approved contract or if you've picked up a copy from another investor at one of your REI clubs, make sure that you have a comfort level with that where you could sit across from somebody and say, what about this, what about that, and fill that in every single blank. You need to know what it's for. And then week 6, we talk about exit strategies and we go over a review. So these are all live, so there's always opportunity for Q&A, but it's important to have an A plan, a B plan, possibly a C and a D, so that when you are thinking about how can I get rid of this property, and I'll give you an example, a little short example of why this is important, so that you can be prepared that if plan A doesn't work out, let's quick sneak plan B in there. Because with plan A, you've got let's just say you've got a property with hard money and it doesn't sell and it doesn't sell. And then you get an offer and their financing falls through and so it still doesn't sell. Well, now you're up against your 6-month term on that hard money loan. And if you don't get that thing sold and get their money back, then you could be looking at losing everything that you've put into that deal. Plan B might be that you wholesale it to someone, some other investor, and sure, you lose your profit, but at least you get that money back from the investor or the hard money lender who is an investor or a group of investors usually, and then you can at least get them their money back and you're not stuck owing anything at the end. That might be a plan B. Maybe plan C is to go ahead and refinance it yourself. If you have good enough credit, then you could buy the place and keep it as a rental. Maybe keeping that particular house as a rental was not your best plan, but now as circumstances change, that becomes your best plan. So that's how it goes. You've got to think of, if this works, great, but if not, here's this and here's this and here's this, and have multiple exit strategies on every single deal that you do. Steve, what do you have on that?
Yeah, just the more options you have, the more safety net you build for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you just want to be able to explore some of the different exits that you might be able to implement, and pick the ones that are going to be best for you, line them all up, and then try to execute from A to B and go to C or D if you have to. But work hard on those first best options.
And certainly it's okay to swap out your financing. So if plan A was to finish with the hard money lender, but now you're running out of time and they won't extend you, maybe getting a private investor or a partner in there is great. If you stand to make $50,000, even if you have to get a new partner and split that profit 50-50, it's better to walk away with $25,000, giving half of the profit away to a new partner or a new private investor than to lose all $50,000. And sometimes you have to think that way and make your exit plan according to what keeps most or all of your profit, if possible. So turning it from a fix and flip into a fix up and a rent, you could potentially keep all of your profit and have a nice cash flow at the end. So that could be a good combo of one financing technique to a second financing technique where you don't lose money. Selling to a new buyer, as in cashing out, selling to a new buyer with seller financing, so you don't cash out immediately, but you cash out over time. There are several different ways to seller finance a deal, these being some of the more popular: your owner carryback, your land contract, or your wraparound mortgage. Also, lease options are fantastic, very good way to open up the parameters for who can buy the property. Instead of just having a new buyer that's a cash out and they get new financing if they have good credit. Now, if you open up to the lease option market, maybe they don't have good credit, but you can still sell the property that way and more people can qualify. So pros and cons: you don't get all of your money out right away, but you do get all your money out eventually, and then some sometimes, so that's nice too. And then the rent, like a conventional rent or renting to an agency. So there are several exit strategies right there for you. And there are more. We can cover those. And as you guys say, well, what about this? What about that? That's what we help you do, is explore your options and figure out what your best exit strategies might be on a particular property. Steve, do you have anything on today's takeaway for this?
No, other than just understand that there's a lot of detail that goes into each one of these, and we do cover that. But for today, we just wanted to give you an overview of those different options. Just if you can, on the takeaway, if you can determine what some of those best strategies are, and you can do that after you've taken an inventory of what your resources are, and what your time frames are and what your goals are, like we were mentioning earlier, and then just map that out. So on this slide, there's a couple of different options that you can look at, and a little brief synopsis of the different kinds of strategies and kind of what they do for you. So wholesaling is a good way to build up cash, just so that you can invest in more deals. Buy, fix, and flip is a little bit longer time frame, but the payoff is really good. But like wholesaling, buy, fix, and flip is kind of a one-off. You do it and you're done, and there's no more payday until you do your next deal. Whereas if you want to build residual income and capitalize on things like equity growth, then you're going to want to do something like a rental strategy or a seller financing strategy. And so just kind of look at where you're at and what opportunity is being presented to you, and then map out what are the options that will best fit. So we kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what that might look like for you, and see what you can do with that.
Excellent. So we do teach all of those different strategies. By the way, tonight we're just covering the buy, fix, and flip, but we do have the wholesaling, the seller financing, and the rentals webinars. So here are some of the additional products and services that we have. We've got the group webinars. We've got the one-on-one appointments, daily group accountability calls Monday through Friday, group coaching for businesses, and then contracts and scripts for purchase. And obviously we help walk you through all of the basics and role play and help you use those if you like. We do have combinations of these products and services if you want to buy a group package, and we can talk to you about that one-on-one. Here are all of the investing webinar series that we currently have. We've got wholesaling, rentals, fix and flip, seller financing, bank-owned and foreclosures, commercial properties, and then mobile home parks and storage units. Steve, why don't you cover on the life coaching and personal development?
Yeah, life coaching, it's kind of an interesting thing. And Christine and I both have a mentor that we've been associated with for a few years. And one of her main tenets is that success follows personal growth. And so we really want to be able to look at that and maybe work with some of the issues that may be holding people back. Sometimes they've got all of the answers as far as the strategies they should be implementing, but there's other things going on in their life that are preventing them from actually doing something with it. And you may find yourself in that position. And so, or you may just find that it would be something that would really enhance your life in general to be able to do a better job in some of these areas. So we find that one of the things that's most critical to people is time management. Time is probably the only thing more valuable than money, as far as something that you could train somebody on. And so we want to be able to show you how to not only make better use of the time that you have, but to actually free up time and to make time more of an asset and a friend rather than something that you're just constantly trying to hang on to and create more of. Then we talk a little bit about money management and wealth building and some of the principles there that are very critical and important to you being able to progress. And sometimes it's not following the basic principles involved with success that holds us back from being successful in whatever business we've decided that we wanted to be into. So maybe you decide you want to be a real estate investor, but there's some of these other issues going on that have to do with money management that keep you from getting where you're going or keep you from getting where you want to go. And so we talk about some of those things. We also talk about some of the other major issues in life that can get in the way, things like relationship issues, divorce, grief, loss, and how to recover from that. And also for a lot of folks, addiction recovery. And that might be a number of different kinds of addictions. It's not limited to substance abuse. There's many addictions out there that tend to sideline people and keep them from getting where they want to go. And so we've got some answers to all of those. And we want to be able to offer those to anybody that would really benefit from that and who has the insight to be able to see that they could really use some of those things. So we're offering those as additional programs.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We've got the website at iliveaccelerated.com. We've got my cell phone, which texting is the best, by the way. Leaving a voicemail is a little bit slower, but you can text and say, I'm interested in having a conversation, and then we can set up a time to talk. Also on Facebook, if you go to Accelerated Real Estate Investing or contact me on my personal page, we can, again, set up a time to do a one-on-one just to go over what are your options, what are you looking to do, what resources do you have available to you, and where should we start you, middle you, and finish you. And then our YouTube channel, Tyrell has set that up for us, and it's at I Live Accelerated. So he's right now populating with different videos, some short. If you just have a few minutes, but you want to learn a little something for the day, you can get on there and you could do a video a day. We also have these longer versions that you're welcome to go on if you've got an hour or so and you want to study a whole topic. So we've got those for you, and we are so pleased that you guys came. I want to open up for any questions. So I'm going to look over here. You guys are welcome to put into your questions box or in your chat box any questions that you have at this point about either what we do or anything that we covered tonight. If you have questions on the buy, fix, and flip technique itself, that's part of what we offer live. If you took the time and energy to come here to the live webinar, we're going to take a few minutes and answer questions for you that might help you either get started or move a little bit forward in your buying, fixing, and flipping. So I will watch for questions for a minute. Okay, I'm seeing none, so I think we're good for the night. So you guys have a fantastic week. We'll be back next week. We're going to be doing seller financing. So that's all about how to get into real estate with using little to no money out of your own pocket. Love seller financing. It's very, very creative. And so we are going to expand your mind a little bit into other possibilities that maybe you haven't ever considered were possible in the finance world, in the real estate investing world, and in particular. So come with any questions that you have. We'll be back live again for free, 5 o'clock Mountain Time next week. You guys take care. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Ty, for being here too.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody.